One of the things I've seen in the wedding industry is a hesitance to use credit card processors because of the fee associated. And I feel very strongly as a business owner that it is our responsibility to make the purchasing process as easy for our clients as possible. And to me, that means offering credit card processing.
Hey everybody, this is Eddie Babbage, founder CEO of Timeline Genius, also your host here of the Wedding Industry Insider Podcast, back with another great episode. I'm here with Kaitlyn Magnuson. She is the founder of the Freelance CFO, which is a shame-free accounting firm for creatives based in Idaho. She's been doing her line of work for the last 15 years. And she left the corporate side of things so that she could be the accounting and financial resource that she would have wanted for herself. So, Kaitlyn, thank you so much for taking time to do this interview with me.
Of course, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, this is, I just want to give people a preview of the juicy value and the content that we're going to get into. And it is, no surprise, related to financial strategy and doing the right thing financially for your business, being intentional, right? Because if we're not, it's so easy to kind of slide into the chaos of just letting things haphazardly evolve rather than setting our intention, being responsible, knowing our numbers, and handling our business the way that we should, and knowing that there are a lot of payoffs for that: peace of mind, the success of your business, the health and success of your business, so all of that. But before we get into those topics, Kaitlyn, would you mind just giving our audience a little bit more of a sense for you and your background and how you got where you currently are in life?
Absolutely. I mean, that is a very long story, but the long story short of it is I had always had an aptitude for numbers growing up, and my parents really weren't sure what I was going to end up doing with my life all through high school. Showed a real aptitude for it, started working with small businesses the month that I graduated high school, actually, and ended up really loving making a difference. I mean, sort of ego wise and selfish wise, it was really nice to not be a cog in this really big machine and instead to be making a difference. And I started doing bookkeeping, production management, and really thrived in that smaller environment. And as I went through college and graduated, ended up branching out into sales tax and sales taxability and research, which for a lot of us might be like eye-rollingly boring, but was incredibly intriguing for me because there's a lot of nuance in tax, both in income tax and in sales tax. And so getting to dive into that was really fun for me. But as I'm going along through these corporate gigs and having my business, sort of on the back burner throughout all of this, my parents are like, what are you doing with your life? I think it's fine. It's fine. I'm job hopping every 6 months to 18 months and, making more money and changing careers, and ended up working in workers' comp and payroll, diving back into a small business, working for some really big organizations like Thomson Reuters for a while. And I just kept coming back to loving working with small businesses, whether I was working as an employee of them or working with them. And I kept seeing the pain points that these small businesses were brushing up against. A lot of them, in my case, didn't need a full time person in that finance, bookkeeping, accounting role, but they needed someone that they could trust. And what we kept seeing was we'd have clients that had just been going to their parents' accountant, or they'd been going to H&R Block or TurboTax, and that can be great if you have everything really well organized, right? And your accountant understands what you're doing in your business. Where we were finding the gap is a lot of these business owners didn't get into business to do the accounting, to do the bookkeeping. And so because they're only meeting with their tax preparer, if they're meeting with them once a year, there was a lot that was left on the table. There are a lot of questions that went unanswered, or when they were asked and they were answered, someone was talking over you rather than collaborating with you, making sure that you understood and that they were educating. And so that's really where I came in to fill the gap. And you and I were talking, Eddie, I know about how we work with about 75% of our clients are in the wedding industry.
Right.
Wedding industry clients are really referral based. And so I ended up working with a couple of photographers back in 2015. And now we work with several hundred wedding industry vendors every year. And it has been a little bit of a wild ride, but I think that there's some nuances in the wedding industry that we've seen that are different and really distinct. And so getting to sort of have this like backseat view to all of these businesses has been really interesting for us and has allowed us to provide a lot more value to our clients.
Absolutely. Wow, that's a great answer. What do you see, Caitlin? Well, I have two questions. Actually, just to kind of back into this. It's funny. I actually practiced corporate law in a former life, and if you practice corporate law at, say a larger sort of firm, you end up kind of specializing in a way like what you described.
Hmm.
Like you get into a very narrow, and so you're like, oh, I do, this type of M&A deals or whatever. But if you leave that sort of role at a larger firm and you start working with smaller businesses, you need to start seeing the whole sort of playing field, not just one very narrow issue. For you, um, what was that transition like? The transition from focusing on like sales tax specifically to having this more holistic expertise around being like a fractional CFO.
Delightful, because I honestly really thrive in seeing the whole picture and in how all the parts work together. What I
Mm-hmm.
think was frustrating for me when I worked in corporate and was sent into these siloed areas, it was great for sort of a hyper focused deep dive, right? For 6 to 12 months at a time, really get comfortable, learn what I'm doing. And then it was time to move on because I would be bored or frustrated. I don't love doing the same thing day in and day out. And I think that's why I've loved being a business owner so much. And also, each of those siloed areas as I went through really allowed me to build my skill set to be a much better generalist and big picture when it comes to small businesses.
That's really cool. And you spoke to something else here, Caitlin. I love the idea of your developing this sort of like growing expertise in this industry because I love the wedding industry. I just think it's just such a beautiful. I mean, it all emanates and centers around love. Like,
Right.
how can that be bad, right? It's just a really cool thing. What would you say? Because you alluded to this a little bit. I was actually gonna, I was already thinking about it, but you kind of called out the fact that there are some things that are unique to the business of like wedding professionals. Like, what are some of those things that kind of strike you as being unique to the business of being a wedding industry professional?
So I see the seasonality in the wedding industry differently than in a lot of other businesses. So I'll even give you our business as an example, right? We have seasonality in the accounting world when it comes to income tax prep. There's a lot of additional seasonality that really layers in. But when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to wedding industry specifically, we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing some, your dates are your inventory, right? And so you're seeing dates every year. You're seeing this spike in inquiries that come in. You're seeing wedding booms, you're seeing wedding slowdowns, and you're seeing it caused in a way that I feel like compared to coaches, consultants, graphic designers, marketers, like there's a little bit of seasonality with a lot of those, but not nearly to the extent. And what's very interesting to me in the wedding industry is so much of that is influenced by politics, such as when
Mm-hmm.
we had the COVID shutdown, right? We
Sure.
watched a lot of our northern clients have to slow down.
Yeah.
And in the South, where restrictions were a lot less or a lot more lenient,
I don't
we
think COVID.
brought on we brought on tons of clients from Georgia, the Carolinas, Florida, because
Sure.
a lot of weddings, they were shifting and we were watching a boom there. And that was fascinating to me during, the bulk of COVID to watch how all of that influenced it. But we're also seeing all of these overlapping seasons in the wedding industry because let's say you're in Arizona, your season and your seasonality is going to be very different than if you're in Vermont. And
Yeah.
it's totally different than if you're doing destination. And so you have within the industry all of
Yeah.
these micro peak seasons that pop
Yeah.
up depending on where you are geographically. And so I think that lends its own interesting tilt. And then also the buying patterns that we see, right? And you see this to an extent, like with the jewelry engagement industry as well. But when you see longer engagements, shorter engagements, like the wedding planning process and how bookings are, that to me looks very unique in the wedding industry as compared to a lot of these other industries where for a while, we were seeing 24, 27 plus month engagements for a lot of couples that were coming in. Now, a lot of what we're seeing is like 6 to 12 months. And a lot of them being in the 6 to 8 month range, which changes your cash flow dramatically. It changes your planning. And I don't know if you've seen this, but with a lot of our clients that had been booking 18 to 24 months in advance, they're now going,
Right.
what's happening here, this feels uncomfortable, this feels anxiety inducing because they don't feel like they can plan, when in reality we're able to say, hey, we're seeing this across the board, here are the patterns that we're seeing. We're not saying that it's a saving grace for everyone, but you are kind of in the same boat together, and patterns have shifted.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I couldn't help it. Like, I do believe that like there's certain principles of business that just are industry agnostic. Like, no matter what you're doing, there's certain fundamentals that are present. But then again, every industry also has its unique sort of attributes. I think, for me, Caitlin, and I'll just kind of start getting down to business here in terms of what we talked about, like what I told people we're going to get into. For me, most people in this industry, better than I, it's not like they're like, yay, I want to talk about numbers and taxes. Like, we know that, right? But at the same time, I also know that many people listening to our podcast, if, we're just being really candid, would say, I'm not exactly happy with the profit that I'm making. I'm not, maybe even more relevantly, perfectly happy with the income that I have coming out of my business. And truth be told, you alluded to this with cyclicality. I don't like how lumpy my cash flows are and how unpredictable all of this feels. And that I go to bed with like a little bit of a sense of dread, not knowing what my tax bill is going to be, or that I'll have the money to pay it when it becomes due. But I won't think about that. Let me just stuff that back down in my subconscious. Like, I would love for people to leave this interview feeling more empowered to kind of take control of the financial dimension of their business. So, if I came to you, Caitlin, this is my sort of, I go to this hypo pretty frequently. If I came to you, Caitlin, and I said, maybe, we're a friend of a friend, so I have the privilege of having a lunch with you, right? I'm 3 years into a wedding planning business, okay? And I come to you and I say, Caitlin, got to be honest, I don't feel like I'm getting the profit I want. I don't feel completely in control of my business. We've got an hour or so to chat. What are you going to do in that limited amount of time? What are you going to tell me? Where's the conversation going to start? Like, let's go down that path of you helping me as a planner as much as you could.
I love that. That's a really good setup. So, with that, one of the first questions that I would ask you, knowing that little bit of background, would be, what is your necessary household contribution per month?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of with that, do you know what you need to be bringing to your household finances? Whether it's you as a solo, you as, a partnership, a family, etc. What is your responsibility every month to contribute to your household? And
Mm-hmm.
if you don't know that, I would want you to start there, because I think so frequently what I like to have people do is we reverse engineer this. Most of us started our businesses to support our lives. Yes, we probably love what we do or we're interested in it, we have a knack for it, etc. But if you were independently wealthy, a lot of us may not be needing to do this for a living, but we are. That's the reality we all live in, right? It's like, let's make it supportive and let's plan a little with it. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's say that your household responsibilities are $5,000 a month that you need to be bringing in after taxes, after everything else. That's your contribution to the household. Now, what happens a lot is you will underestimate what your household contribution is, right? Because maybe we've sat down, you've like pulled up your phone, you're looking through your regular bills, you're getting an idea of what you need to be bringing. Because this is what normally happens is you're like, I think it's this, but like, let's check. I recommend looking through 3 to 6 months of your personal bills to confirm that that's actually realistic, because we dramatically tend to underestimate that number. So
Yep.
we've settled on 5,000.
Okay.
I recommend adding 20% to that. There are things that come up. There is lifestyle creep. There are fun vacations, trips, etc. And it never hurts to have a little bit more buffer than a little bit less. So in this example, let's say that that means $6,000 a month.
Okay.
And that's our slosh, everything is in there. As a general rule of thumb, you take that number and you double that. And that's what your business should be bringing in. So 6,000 multiplied by 2 is 12,000. We're going to do a little bit more math. Per year, that puts you at 144
Mm-hmm.
for your business income.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is to factor in software. That's to factor in your Gmail. That's to factor in taxes. That's to factor in hopefully retirement contributions at some point, right? Maybe you're not there yet, but all of those things, this is your goal that you're striving towards. Does this mean that this is a one size fits all for everyone? No, but it's a pretty darn good rule of thumb for you to have a good starting point to shoot towards. What I like to do with this $12,000 number that we have, how many events does this look like? How many weddings is this based on your current pricing? Because all of it works together, right? How many events you're taking on, how you're pricing yourself, what you're providing within those services, and then giving you a goal to work backwards from for what you need to book. So let's say we're going to make this a little bit easier. Let's say that your current pricing, your most commonly booked package is about $6,000. So that would mean on average, you need two of those per month.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be 24 events per year, which is a pretty busy year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you have extenuating circumstances that need to be factored in? Do you have a planning assistant that you're using regularly? If you're, a photographer or a videographer or a DJ or an officiant, do you have a second person, an associate that you're paying? Make sure you're looking at those numbers because that can really inflate the amount that you need to be bringing in. But of this $12,000 number, these 24 events per year, do we need to be looking at changing our prices? How does 24 feel to you when you're looking at that? Because I know from a photographer's perspective, that's a lot. I know from a lot of wedding planning perspectives, that's a lot. It's a lot of touch points. How do you want to be showing up? Do you need to be looking at your personal finances? Do you need to maybe have a conversation of can you bring in less for a little bit? Will you reconfigure? All of those are valid conversations to be having, but that gives you your starting point. So
That's
now,
really,
yeah.
Kayla, that's sorry to interrupt. That's really interesting, and I'm glad you like said what you said because I'm like you're kind of answering the question like, what if I say, Kaitlyn, that all sounds great, but I don't think I'm gonna be able to get 24 events this year, and that's actually what I need. I guess the answer to that is then you need to reevaluate your personal finances, right? Like,
As well as your pricing for your services currently, right?
right,
Because you can only do so much. So it's kind of this multifaceted, hey,
yeah,
is there something else you can be doing in the interim? Could you be doing event planning that's in tangential industries or other, something that's a little bit lower touch to help supplement in
yeah,
the interim? Well, because a lot of times, right, you've booked 6, 8, 12 plus months in advance. So you can only increase your cash flow by taking on more events right now, which we
right,
don't necessarily want to do because it's the ticket to
right,
burnout, or
right,
by raising your prices, but that takes a while to actually come into effect if you're
yeah,
booking a ways out, especially when you're planning, you are booking a ways out. And so with that, I think it's really important to look at the areas that you can control. You can hypothetically control or influence your personal spending. And on
right.
the business side of things, where can we look to be leaner or where can we look to add additional resources? Can you mentor other wedding planners that are looking to get started? Can you provide DIY or templates for couples that are looking that maybe have a smaller budget? What could you be offering here that doesn't suck up as much of your time, but allows you to still hit those approximate income goals that we've laid out?
And the key thing is just the intentionality, right? Like there's such a stark difference between doing this exercise and approaching this like with the mindfulness that you're talking about versus what heck I've been guilty of at times as an entrepreneur, which is like I'm just running and gunning here, doing whatever tasks are on my task list. Like, no, like kind of taking that step back and looking at, what do I need from the business? So that yeah, I like that just as a construct.
I think can be a really valuable tool also when you're looking to see the what ifs, right? So maybe you've only been needing to contribute $2,000 to your household. Maybe you've been working a day job while you're doing all of this as well. And maybe you're looking to leave a day job. Maybe you're looking to charge higher prices. Maybe you're looking to get into the luxury market. This is a really good exercise for you to use to play with those numbers as well and get a feel for what that looks like. Because if you need to be bringing in $60,000 a year, with your business, that's a lot different than 144 or $200,000 a year with your business. And so getting comfortable playing with what those numbers look like, I will say, as a general rule of thumb, as your business grows in revenue, not necessarily in number of events, it gets easier to keep your overhead a little bit smaller because you only have the same Gmail, you only have the same software. It's not growing with you. And I feel like that can be really overlooked because it's expensive to start, expensive compared to a brick and mortar, significantly lower startup costs. But when
Right.
you're making $50,000 versus 100 or 150, you can start seeing those margins increase a little bit. So it does get a little bit lighter if your overall pricing is higher, but your number of events stays the same at that point.
So we talked about something all in the pre-interview that I think is a related but tangential topic, and that is the idea of being intentional in the payment structures that we offer, like the timing of the payments, especially in the context, like we talked about, like cyclicality in business. Like, what is your best advice for anybody who maybe is open to revising the terms like of their payment structure?
Yeah, so we've actually gone through this process with a couple of wedding planners that we work with in the last few years who came to us. They were in the luxury wedding planning sphere, but they were having, and they were well known, they've been in the sphere for a while, and they were having issues with cash flow. And it's frustrating, right? Because you're making on paper a great living every year. Your business is profitable, you're able to pay your people, but it is feast or famine. And so you feel like when all of this revenue comes in during your peak season, you have a tendency to, it's like dieting, right? I actually look at finances a lot like dieting. You can have a yo-yo diet where you restrict for a long time and then you eat all of this food and you're like, ah, same thing with finances.
Yeah.
So where do we reverse engineer? And we've had some that have adapted to this really well, and we've had some that have chosen not to but have still updated structures. So a lot of times, especially for wedding planning, we see an initial deposit put down. And then I've seen a couple of different ways, but essentially like periodic payments leading up to the event, with a lot of times 50 to 25% being due within the last 60 days, and then a
Okay.
balance after the event has occurred. What that ends up doing is you go peak, dip, little peak, big peak, but you also have all of your expenses associated. In the meantime, like with your contract labor, et cetera, if you have,
Right.
individuals or vendors that you're paying, in the meantime, you have regular operating costs. Maybe you have a VA, you have your salary to pay. And so what we've recommended doing for a lot of them is having a deposit and then
Mhm.
breaking the rest of the payment up into monthly installments. It's a win-win for most clients, especially if you have an automated system. I know like a lot of our clients will use Dubsado or Tave or Bill.com. And I love it as a client to be able to
Yeah.
just break it up and have it go throughout the year or the 18 months or whatever. That gives you predictability. It gives the client predictability. Is there still probably a bill to settle up with after the event?
Yeah.
Generally, yes. But that makes your peaks and valleys significantly less steep or less deep, which lets
Mm.
you predict your income and make that plan to work backwards much easier for you at the end of the day.
Well, and you anticipated one of the things when you talked about the automation piece, because I know over the years I've heard, a number of planners say, if I don't like having to be the bad guy to like email and say, hey, can you take care of that invoice? Nobody likes to go collecting what they're, owed. And it increases the number of touch points. But
Yes.
if it's automated, then I would say, I mean, I don't know if you have any further views on that, because I have heard people say, like I could see that being like something that gives people pause. Like, what are your thoughts to that sort of
I have some
reservation?
really strong thoughts, and I'm going to hold off
All
from getting
right.
on a full tangent with
Oh, I
it.
like it. Get on
But
the get
um,
on with that.
so, as a fellow business owner with seasonality, this is something we've done in our own business.
Hmm.
We have implemented most of our packages are spread. There is a pay in full option, but most of them are a monthly basis leading up to a deadline. So if someone signed up today for taxes and they wanted a
Yes.
payment plan, it would be spread from now until April 15th on a monthly basis, and it is automated.
Love it.
Yes, there are more touch points. Yes,
Yeah.
potentially you might have a failed payment at some point. You might have a card that changes.
Hmm.
However, I feel like that touch point is significantly less work than
Yeah.
trying to balance uneven cash flow throughout the year. I would
I would.
rather have our VA, who's a delight, take 5 minutes once a day to check payments and to send a little email. Hey, your card needs to be updated. Let me know if I can facilitate this for you, which is great. And I think it can be a positive touch point for the client. And I think that to avoid my rant, one of the
No,
things that
I
I've
love
seen in the
seamless. flow here. Okay, just let it out.
Okay, one of the
Let
things I've seen in the wedding industry is a hesitance to use credit card processors because of the fee associated. And I
yeah.
feel very strongly as a business owner that it is our responsibility to make the purchasing process as easy for our clients as possible. And
Hmm.
to me, that means offering credit card processing, meaning Stripe, Dubsado, Honeybook, PayPal, I don't care. But we've had a lot of
Or
wedding
shout
industry
out at Rock
vendors.
Paper Coin as we talked. Do you know Rock Paper
Yeah.
Coin?
Yes,
Yeah.
I've heard of them. Yeah.
Okay. They're awesome.
Yeah.
Those are
No, but make it easy. And
yeah.
whether it's an ACH and there's a $5 fee or a $25 fee or it's credit card, I don't care. That expense is a write off for your business,
Yeah. Yeah.
that merchant processing fee that you pay. And
Yeah.
how many more clients are you able to accommodate and make the process easy for when you do that and you can automate it versus Zelle or Venmo or Cash App or Apple Pay or all of these crazy things that we see come across that don't make the process as streamlined. And so I would recommend that if you are worried about that, the 3% fee, increase your fees by 5%
Yep.
and bite it. It is so well worth it. And I think that it is really short-sighted. And it's not just wedding industry that we see this happen, and it's a lot of small business owners. And I think a lot of times they can, especially when you're getting started, you can look at yourself as an entrepreneur or a freelancer, but not a business owner. And I think if you can
Hello.
step back, look at it as a business owner, a bit, Apple accepts credit cards. Apple makes the process easy. Like again, we're not the size of Apple, but like how are you making this process easier and how are you making it so that you can systemize and grow? And a lot of that to me is automated invoices. It's being able to set it, not have to mess with it, let it run and make it easy for your client. And I think that that is so overlooked in saving a couple $100 in processing fees over the course of a year.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that I coaxed you into getting on your soapbox there and giving me what you call the rant, but I feel like it's just preaching the gospel. Um, because and I think it even transcends just this sort of, category of like these payment processing fees because, as a software vendor with Timeline Genius, I see, this stark contrast in the mindset of some. Ironically, the people that are kind of humming with their businesses are doing so because of the mindset that you just like spoke about, which is like, I am willing to make an investment. And it's not that they're like less cost conscious. If anything, I feel like they're a little bit more cost conscious in the sense of like, mindful and intentional and strategic about the way they're spending their money. But if they can invest in a tool or, platform that's going to save them time and let them operate at a higher level, they do it. And 3%, I mean, if you've got $1 and you give away 3 pennies, you don't do it whimsically, but like you also don't like wig out about it if it's getting a good
Well,
return.
and I think so much of it is like jumping over dollars to save pennies, right? You're looking at these little tiny leaks when you could be looking at like overall systems that need to be overhauled or ways that you could be saving dollars.
As a wedding planner, you know how important it is to create detailed wedding day timelines for your events. But creating your timelines can be a tedious and time-consuming job. Until now. Because Timeline Genius lets you create beautiful, detailed wedding day timelines with ease. And it keeps everything you need on the wedding day in one central place. Here's how it works. First, Timeline Genius saves all your clients, vendors, and venues in your Rolodex, so you don't lose time looking for their information. And when you're ready to create a new timeline, you simply enter the key information for your wedding. Click a button, and voila! Timeline Genius magically gives you a customized timeline for your event, where all the details are laid out and the times are calculated for you. From there, you can easily edit your timeline by adding or deleting items, inserting images, changing font styles, and customizing everything to your liking. You can also instantly shift the times for as many items as you want. And when it comes to your clients and vendors, Timeline Genius lets you give them the highest level of service. You can send them tailored timelines, showing only the items they're involved in. And you can collaborate by inviting them to a mobile-friendly, web-based version of the timeline. You can even set text message reminders to automatically go out on the wedding day. And once you've completed your perfect timeline, you can download it or email it out as a beautifully styled PDF. And that's Timeline Genius, a smart software that will help take your wedding planning to the next level. Start your free trial today.
That's really helpful. So I like this notion of like being intentional. Again, that's what it is. If somebody's already got a payment structure that's working for them, great. But if you don't, stop and look at it. Nobody says you can't change it. You can. And I really like the idea there, and just the focus on automating it, not being afraid to kind of implement a flow that works for you. My question, I guess, would be, Kaitlyn, bringing it back to my little hypothetical lunch outing that we're having. You've started off in what I think is a really logical place, which is, Eddie, what income do you need from this business? Because that's the kind of core, yeah, you're doing what you love, but the core expectation and drive behind having a business is to get you an income that you need to support your life and your family. After kind of walking through that and reverse engineering pricing and the number of events that I need to do, what's the next thing that you would steer me toward to, again, just give me as much help and value as you could give in, a lunch meeting for the financial piece of my business?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's say that hypothetically, using our same number as examples from before, you're like, whoa, 24 is way more than I want to be doing in a given year. I really feel good about 12, for
Mm-hmm.
example, right? It's one a month, feels really comfortable for where I'm at. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe you can reduce your personal expenses by $1,000.
Okay. Yeah.
So in this case, we're at 4,000. So we're looking at, I'm going to do the math quickly. We're going to say like 4,750 is what you need to be bringing in
Okay.
per month. So if we
Okay.
double that, that's 9,500
Right.
per month versus 12,000. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
actually pull up the calculator for a hot second because I want to give real world examples. But let's say we have 9,500 times 12. So you're looking at 114,000. And you're like, okay, that's 12 events. So 9,500 a month, 9,500 an event. What does that look like? What kind of services can I be providing? And what we brush up a lot against, so maybe we're brushing up against this in our lunch meeting. Maybe you're like, whew, I've been charging 6,000. Like 9,500 feels like a really big stretch. I'm not comfortable making that jump. All the limiting beliefs and everything pops up, right? I know people that are charging 100,000 plus, for what they're providing.
Yeah.
I know you can charge 9,500. Like I have full faith, but half the battle, if not more, is your belief in yourself. And I think your ability to feel confident in providing your services and that value and your own finances. So, okay, let's say, Eddie, what feels like a little bit of a stretch right now? Maybe you're like, you know what, 7,500 feels like a little bit scary, but like I could do it.
Okay.
So then we would go, okay, so that leaves you with a $2,000 a month gap,
Right.
hypothetically, right? How are we
Mm-hmm.
going to make up that gap? And then I would look at that from two different arenas. One, you've been doing this for 3 years now. So you have
Mm-hmm.
some experience. You could be helping baby wedding planners.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So maybe you're doing a series of mentorship sessions with someone, and maybe that's $500 a month for 3 months. Okay. So we've chipped away at that, right? And it's a temporary thing, but maybe you're doing it in your off season. So it's great because you have all this time. Maybe you can do 3 of those during your off season. You're starting to build this, you're feeling really good about it. That can lend itself really well, if you love that, to maybe a group program that you're putting out. Maybe, a done for you offering for, we see it happen all the time. I did this exact same thing for years, right? During my off season, I would train business owners that didn't have the finances to hire us to do for you, to do DIY. And then that evolved into a group program. So we're making up a little bit of what we're doing here, right? We're at 1,500. You're like, Kaitlyn, during peak season, I can't be doing this. I can't be, finding these other avenues. So, where do we have options for our couples who are also looking for things during peak season and leading up to peak season? Again, do you have a done with you where you have a couple come to you and they're like, "Hey, Eddie, we don't have 7,500, but we have $2,000 for the next 18 months. Like, what can you help us with? What resources can you provide?" Do you have a vendor list? Do you have, your timeline? Do you have, like, what do you have that you can lay out for them to make this journey more enjoyable while still meeting their budgets? And so it comes into, okay, this is where I think it's fun, but maybe not everyone thinks it's fun, but it's like this game of Tetris, right? and you're just mixing and matching what feels good from a time standpoint, from what you feel confident booking, and you're filling those financial gaps. Then, once we've built our confidence at that 7,500, maybe you book 6 weddings at the 7,500 and you're like, I've got this. This is great. We'll bump it up to 8,500. And you're like, okay, we booked another 6. And then by the next year, you're at 9,500 and that's feeling comfortable. And then you can do price increases and then you can choose. Do you want to keep these side things going? Do you bring someone in that's a junior planner that can help you so you can be running your group program? Or, it depends on what you really like doing. Maybe you love teaching. Maybe you decide you absolutely hate teaching mentoring, which happens, and you want to be doing the work. All of that gives you opportunities to make decisions once your finances are secured. And maybe we see that you hit that 9,500 per event that you're charging for. And maybe you still have time during your off peak season to be doing all of these other things. Maybe you have another savings goal, you have a retirement goal, you have something personally on the financial side where you feel really comfortable with where the money is, so that you can then again reverse engineer and maybe your financial requirements go up a little bit in this case. All of those can feel really good for Tetrising where you need your finances to be in the long run.
I like that. And, as with everything, Kaitlyn, I just want to acknowledge because I can hear people, at this point, I've talked to so many planners. I feel like there's like a planner brain in my head that gets activated through these interviews. And I'm sure, some people is like, yeah, well, it sounds easy, but actually, I don't really know another way to make a meaningful income. And in my market right now, like I've talked to a lot of planners, they're like, yeah, things are slower. And all of that is true or might be in your case. And that's not to, obviously don't get disheartened if that is your current situation. But what I love about what you're saying, Kaitlyn, is no matter what, it's super productive to at least be doing this analysis, right? At least that there's a Tetris game to be played. At least what your target is and what that shortfall is. So it prompts your mind to start thinking creatively about ways to address it. And over time, you can figure out a way. Whereas if you're just kind of flying blind, then you don't even know what's happening, which doesn't mean that it's still having a profound effect on your business, but you're not consciously sort of managing and trying to optimize the situation.
I think it puts you behind the driver's seat versus like riding outside the vehicle and not having an opportunity to steer it.
100%. Like that little sidecar on like the motorcycle, that old, like you're just here for the ride. Business, you got the wheel. So what would you say, Kaitlyn, if, we get to a point and let's say we reach a point where I get that sort of blissful nirvana of what I want to take out of my business in the form of income with that, 20% buffer you suggested. I've got it all mapped out in terms of pricing, number of events, and, I've got the good fortune of saying, Kaitlyn, I think I can do that. Now that you've helped me, again, going back to our little lunch, we do this mental, I think I can get there, Kaitlyn. I got that covered. Now what? In terms of what I should do if I don't have a Kaitlyn who I've hired, we can talk about when and how to kind of go about filling a fractional CFO role. But like, let's say that, I don't have that person on my team. It's just me. I'm the CFO. I'm the lead planner. I'm the everything. Right? What would you tell me to do next to engineer financial health?
Yeah, I think one of the best things that you can be doing on a regular basis, assuming that you have an understanding of your income and expenses. And there are Excel sheets, there's ChatGPT, there's our resources. Like there are courses, there are really low cost options, and there are free options for you to feel really confident understanding what income and expenses are for your business. Because I do think there could be some misconceptions around like, oh yeah, it's a write-off, right? Like a la Schitt's Creek, where you're like, I don't know, the write-off people do it. Not always the case. And it's not a 1-to-1 ratio, which I think is a really big misconception. A lot of times at the end of the year, we have someone come in that's like, do I need to spend more in my business? Number one, really nuanced question. Number two, if you're just trying to spend more to save on taxes and you don't need to buy anything, please don't do it. Number two, there's strategy around it, right? So like, let's say this is a high income, high profit year for you. You need to invest in some equipment or a computer. Probably better to buy it this year than
Right.
next year if next year's forecasted to be a lower income. And same thing if it's, vice versa, maybe we wait until January to buy that computer if you had parental leave this year and you were out for 3 months. Now, that being said, we take our income and expenses that we have that we're comfortable with. We're like, okay, I've got this. I know what I need to be selling. I know what my rough profit is from that. I know what my take home is. You want to be looking at that every month and then more in depth every quarter. And so when I say every month, I'm being honest, it's really just a quick touch base. Maybe it's 10, 15 minutes. You've categorized everything. You have an idea of where your pay is because it lets you identify big leaks before they become big leaks. So maybe you had a month where you took 60% of the profit out of the business. You had something pop up personally. We're taking a note of that, right? And that's why we've added that 20% buffer into our calculations. But if it becomes a habit or your cost of living has increased or your rent has gone up, we need to be refactoring that in. And so that lets you catch it sooner than later. Quarterly, you're looking at it to assess, is this plan still aligned with what I'm doing in reality and with where I want to be going? Because in your example, Eddie, maybe you're like, holy cow, we've booked what our weddings have been $11,000 each, and we've already booked 8 of them for the year. We're feeling really good. Do you want to price increase? Do you want to change how many you're going to be offering? Do you want to increase your personal living? Do you want to invest towards a vacation because you're like, I deserve it. I need to take some time off when I'm done with peak season, but that lets you make those decisions and course correct again, rather than just like bebopping along and letting your business take you where it goes because there's money in the account. This puts you firmly in control of it. And I'm going to say quarterly. If you are paying quarterly estimated taxes, which are not actually quarterly, they are just 4 times a year, this dovetails pretty nicely with quarterly estimated taxes and with assessing where you're at to make tax payments or to make sure that you have sufficient amounts in savings, which again, super household dependent. There are calculators that you can look at. You can pull it up on the state's website, on the IRS's website. Keep in mind your taxes factor in your household income. And that's a mistake that I see happen a lot. All well and good if you and your spouse's income are relatively similar. You're not necessarily going to see some huge bump. Where we have seen things happen is maybe there's a spouse that is traditionally employed making significantly more than your business is bringing in. And you're looking at your income and you're going, okay, well, I'm in the 22% tax bracket. Your spouse might be in the 37% tax bracket. That means that household wise, you're in the 37% bracket and you are not saving enough for taxes because your income gets combined. So like those are the things to be looking at on a approximately quarterly basis so that you can be course correcting before you get to the end of the year. And if you see yourself booking significantly more, the goal there would be that you're maybe having a conversation, whether it's with a trusted financial person, whether it's with your parents' accountant, because again, in a pinch, something there is better than nothing. But you're having a conversation and you're doing it during the middle of the year when possible. Like July, August, great time of year if you're not slammed to do a really quick touch base to make sure that you're on track because you still have 6 months plus to make corrections so that you don't have a big surprise tax bill. Or if you do, you've really been able to diminish how large it is.
I really like that, Kaitlyn. Yeah, so it's like kind of building this practice of regularly evaluating your finances and course correcting as you go throughout the year. I have another question that I think is going to be like a good, interesting, and exciting one for people to hear the answer to. But before I ask, I do want to just tell people, do a quick little aside here. For those that don't know about Timeline GS, I just want them to know that we are the world's best way to create, execute, and collaborate on your wedding day timelines. And we also this year launched probably the biggest feature release since we've been in business for the last 11 years, which is a checklist feature set. So not only can you do the day of timeline, you can also have this industry leading checklist feature set at your fingertips. And it really, for me, Kaitlyn, kind of comes back to what we were talking about. And I think sometimes the people will hear like, oh, well, I've already got a way of doing timelines, but it's being willing to make that investment to not only save what I think your most precious commodity is, which is your time, which is basically your life, like some amount of time
Right.
is what you have in this life, but also to elevate your level of professionalism and to decrease the stress that you have in your job. If people are spending, if you're doing 20 events a year and you're spending 10 hours start to finish on average on your timelines, it's 200 hours a year. Most people using our software cut that down by a factor of at least 65%. So if you were saving 130 hours, what is that worth to you? Because I'd like to think that you could take that time and strategically apply it to some of these higher level practices that we're talking about, and that it would really pay off in spades for your business. So anyway, anybody, if you're a wedding planner, you do timelines, go to timelinegenius.com, check it out, start a free trial. I think you'll be blown away by it. So now back to the question that I kind of teased. And it is this, Kaitlyn. I'm a firm believer, there's this whole sort of like movement in tech entrepreneurship around who, not how. This notion that like we as entrepreneurs, we start thinking, how can I do this? And you kind of got my mind turning because you're like, oh, like, get trained on this yourself, blah, blah, blah. And like, I get that because sometimes we have to do things ourselves. But in an ideal world, I almost feel like I strike that. I definitely think in an ideal world that somebody who, crazy as you are, you love this stuff. God bless you, Kaitlyn. This is like this lights you up. And I took semesters of accounting, but it's still like, and I'm sure listening, like, really, do you really love doing this? And you do. And that's what's beautiful,
Yeah.
right? Like everybody has their skills and interests. Can you paint for me the sort of dream scenario, right? Where look, just you can obviously without using any names, think of like the clients that you have, wedding industry pros that you're like, this person's killing it. Like they're just killing it. They're in control. I mean, everybody's got their challenges, but they're in control. They're making the money they want. The business is running the way they want, and they've, I'm guessing to some meaningful degree, outsourced some of this to you. Talk to me about what that looks. I just want people to have in mind a possible vision that they may not implement today, but an A plus dream scenario that could be achieved at some point where the stuff that, let's be honest, nobody really wants to be doing, can be handed off to a pro like you.
Right. So I have two that come to mind immediately. And it's interesting because they're at slightly different income levels, but both in the luxury markets. One of them newer to that and kind of in a niche market within there, which is really interesting to me from like a case study perspective. But she has been with us since it was just me back years and years and years ago. And it's been so interesting to me because our business has evolved, her business has evolved, and she is really comfortable with a low level of touch from us.
Gotcha.
We
Okay.
do her quarterly estimates, her bookkeeping is handled, her payroll is handled. We chat once a year, and her taxes are handled always on an extension because her busy season is during taxes.
Gotcha.
Works out great. She is just done. I mean, so,
Yeah.
so clean and cut and dry. She is an
Yeah.
absolute professional at what she's doing. She has
Yeah.
associate photographers that come in and help her with what she's doing, and she's thriving. The biggest issue that she comes up against is her time. And so we've basically eliminated the time required to do any of the finance side of things. Her retirement is
Sweet.
automated, her payroll is
Sweet.
automated. Yeah, she sends us receipts and she has a little app that
Okay.
pops them to us. Done. And it's delightful. We're
Wow.
working on convincing her to bring on like an OBM or sort of like an EA because I think that that's really the next step for her because we've got
Okay.
this on lock. Her finances look great. And it's amazing. She's making 250 to 350 a year in total business revenue. Her take
Wow.
home is about 120 of that. She's really comfortable and she's doing a lot of destinations. She's going places she wants to be. Like she's able to embody the life that she wants to live, if not just a little busier than she'd like to be, which to an extent is also great because she can turn down and she knows she can turn down events that aren't exactly what she wants to be doing. Like she is taking her dream clients and she's having a flippin' ball and really loves it, which is fun to see, right? Like we want to see you just so stoked. Our other client who is a wedding planner, little bit of a different story. She's a little bit higher income in this case, and she brought us on at a VIP level. We're meeting. She had some challenges coming up. She has a couple of employees. She has grown her business. She really watched it expand in the luxury market specifically, which she'd broken into about 8 years ago. And she was feeling really comfortable for a while. But then she felt like as her business grew, her accountant didn't grow with her.
Mm.
And she had been, because she'd hired an accountant beforehand, whereas our other client had just had someone that was some tax dude, right? There wasn't like an ongoing regular relationship. This client had had a regular relationship with someone, and
Okay.
they weren't awful, but there's such a big gap between not awful and
Right.
true partner. And she is a very straight to the point, clear communicator. And it was one of my biggest success moments of last year that after a year with us, she renewed. And not only did she renew, but she said that we were the best investment that she has made in her business in that year, which to me was just, it's the absolute goal, right? We've come in and we've partnered with her. We're meeting with her quarterly. She's getting support from our senior team. We're helping her navigate, job offers with her team, updating what her team is doing, looking at forecasting for the next year. She is, as a wedding planner, one of the most detailed humans I've ever met, which I love so much because we can have, even if she's not understanding the finance part of it in depth or the tax part of it, we can meet and have the level of detail that she feels confident walking away from and going, yes, I know what I need to do now. I know exactly how much money I need to bring in. I know what I have set aside for taxes will cover me. I feel really good about this because there's anxiety that comes up, right? Even in these really high performing professionals, they just want to know that they're not going to have some fat tax bill at the end of the year that they're not expecting. And that's one of the big things that we come in to help with, as well as in her case, the growth, the change, the mat leave that one of her employees had, like navigating what all of that looks like.
I love the idea of kind of posing that question, Kaitlyn, just because I think, and I'll bet people can almost feel the relief as you're talking of like these two sort of models, especially that first one where they're like, wait a minute, you mean I'm not doing anything, which may be the case right now, but if you're not doing anything right now and nobody else has been hired to do it, that's not a good thing, right? I'm not doing anything, and I've got the peace of mind of knowing that this hugely important part of my business is being managed diligently, mindfully, etc. The question though, because like just as soon as they have like that sort of wow, that's amazing, comes the like concurrent feeling of like, yeah, but I can't afford that. I'm not there. So it raises the question for me of if that ideal sounds good to people, like how and when do they progress to a point where they're handing this off to, somebody such as yourself?
That's a really common question. And honestly, I would challenge this for a lot of professions other than mine as well. Can you afford not to at least have a consult with a professional, like with a lawyer, like with an
Yeah.
accountant,
Yeah.
like with a sales or marketing coach, if that's something that you're not, meeting your
Yeah.
goals in?
Yeah.
Because I can tell you right now that a couple $100 spent with us on a consult, if you're
Yeah.
not ready to outsource yet, right? Maybe you're just getting started, which we see happen frequently. Maybe you're under $50,000 a year. That can give you such a good road mark that it's individualized. When I hit this mark, I need to change to an S corp election, or I need to be an LLC. I need to look at hiring around this point.
Yeah.
And I think that so many people, either out of shame or out of not thinking they're ready yet, or out of hearing other stories of like, well, my accountant said that I shouldn't do anything until I hit 350,000 a year. True story. Have heard that. There are lots
Mm.
of things that we can be doing long before you hit that amount of income. I think that the consult call at any size makes sense
Yep.
because you get individualized advice for you that can save you thousands, if not more. I think
Mm-hmm.
where we see a lot of clients come on, like for example, in that entry level tier,
Mm-hmm.
they need a lifeline at that point. They're like, hey, we saw it happen a lot during COVID, right? There was a boom. They had more work than they knew what to do with. And they're like, hey, I need help because I am terrified that I am not going to know what my tax bill is at the end of this year. And so for them, a lot of them were in the like 50 to $80,000 range. And
Wow.
there
Yeah.
are checkpoints that you can do, right? Like maybe you're not doing fully outsourced. Maybe you're hopping in and you're having quarterly estimates and taxes done every year, or you're
Hmm.
paying for a twice a year tax consult call. It's not everything or nothing. There are these intermediate steps that I think you can take long before. And then for outsourced, like the one that's doing the associate that is like set it and forget it, there's a level of comfort financially. I'd say once you're in the hundred-ish thousand dollar mark and above, where things can start being automated more, right? Like her cost of living is relatively low. So we don't have to worry about, does she have the funds on hand to do payroll automated year round? Yes, she does. There's $60,000 sitting in that account. We've got a great buffer, not a big deal. But that doesn't normally happen until you get a little bit more profitable, which can be assisted with by bringing in a professional, whether it's accountant, sales, software, legal, all of those work really well together. And I think should be at least checked in with, because we will tell people, hey, you're not ready to work with us yet. This is what you need to do. This is where you need to be at. And this is why. We don't want to just, quote, take your money. We're here to provide a benefit and to be a partner. And I think that that's really important for people to understand is if you're not able to chat with your accountant, whether it's us or someone else, there's great accountants out there besides us, but any service provider, you should be able to have a candid conversation with about where you are and feel like you've been listened to and heard. Because I think that speaks to the success of a relationship a lot more than just an arbitrary, I hit 100,000, it's time to hire out.
Right.
Well, if you hire the wrong person, or if you're not going to be diligent in sending receipts, or if you're not going to have systems set up, it's only going to take you so far.
That totally makes sense, Caitlin. Yep. I watch the time flies, it often does here, Caitlin. And because we talked a little bit in the pre-interview about this, like the question that I always end these interviews on is an open-ended one, which is if you could give one piece of advice, Caitlin, to everybody listening, just based on all your years of life experience, personal, professional, that would be as helpful as possible to them in leveling up their business? Like, what piece of advice would you share?
I had one chosen that you and I had chatted about, and I'm actually going to deviate from that one.
I like
And
it.
my piece of advice would be to hire help before you need it. And when I say hire help before you think you need it, I mean personally or professionally. I think that when we come down to this time versus money, I think so frequently it is really easy to want to do everything yourself, to bootstrap it, to use Google Sheets when you could be using a better software option, right? To have a Gmail account instead of a workspace account. Like all of these little things that could add to not only your available time, your available income, your available professionalism, but in the wedding industry, we see a lot of women, especially, and a lot of women that may have more domestic or household duties. Where can you hire out? Where can you hire a housekeeper? Where can you send someone to do your laundry? Where can you reduce your mental load to free you up in your life and in your business? Again, within your overall financial plan. So, tying back to what we were talking about, if I know that my best life involves a housekeeper coming in once a week at $200, you bet that when I'm looking at future forecasting, I'm adding that into my personal budget that I need to be bringing home, if that makes a difference for myself.
I love that, Caitlin. I love that. My mind is just kind of my hamster's turning in my mind as it's funny. My wife, you made me recall. This was maybe like a year and a half ago. She was in this coaching program, and the lady that the coach, she came in one time and she had a 8-figure annual business, like tens of millions, like and she just kind of started going off script in terms of the advice and mentorship she was giving the group that day. And she was just like talking like about what would I tell myself, like knowing what I know now, seeing the growth of my business. If I could go back in time and talk to an earlier version of me and just give like one piece of advice that would help me build my business faster and better. And she said exactly what you said, Caitlin, that I would have hired sooner. And I think the thing that kind of keeps us from doing that, I feel like, all of the concerns you mentioned, and another notable one that you were kind of indirectly, I think, getting at, which is like, I don't have the money to do that, right? Like kind of like a scarcity mindset,
Hmm.
right? Like I think you could also be nobody. I mean, you could also be too far on this side where you're like, okay, I'm gonna go hire
YOLO. Yeah.
whatever, even though I made $1,000 this month. Like,
Yeah.
how do you kind of balance the implementation, Kaitlyn? Like, how do you know when you're being unwise and a little too hasty in hiring versus, and it sounds like you think most people draw the line too far on this side of like, no, I'm not ready
I
yet. But
have seen the opposite though.
yeah,
I have seen the opposite. I think I'm going to say like 70% of the time people hire too late in whatever regard, right? Because so
yeah,
many of us try to do it all, whether out of shame,
yeah,
necessity.
yeah,
I don't need to hire this out. I can do it
yeah,
myself, whatever.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm awful at graphic design. I'm awful at interior design. There are so many things that I am horrendous with. And this
yeah,
finally sunk in for me when I sat and I tried to design a collage wall for 8 hours. Like, I
yeah,
kid you not. I ended up with
yeah,
nothing. I sent it to a girlfriend. She did it in 30
yeah,
minutes. And I was like,
yep,
oh, this is why I shouldn't be
yeah, yeah,
doing it.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think that a lot of it comes down to your risk tolerance. And
yeah.
I've talked about this before, but I think so much of being an entrepreneur and whether you'll be a successful long-term entrepreneur is your grit. Granted, there's situations, there's privilege, there's all these other factors that play in, but it's your grit and determination to continually bet on yourself. So for me, when I was working a day job and I had my business, my rough hourly was 125 and my day job was like 50 an hour. So for me, if there was something that I could outsource that fell between $50 an hour and 125 an hour, it was in that no man's land, right? If it was under 50, almost
Totally.
always a given because not only at my day job or in my business, I can make more. The trick is you actually need to make more money because if you do nothing with that time, then like just lost opportunity. But that, or if it was more than 125, that's where I'd have a discussion of, are they going to be able to do this faster? For example, if it's 75 an hour and it takes them 2 hours and it would take me 5 hours, kind of a no brainer because then it is still more per hour. But I think that where I've seen it spiral out of control is where people will buy coaching or courses like they're going out of style. And I did this forever. It was like shiny object
I
syndrome.
love that investment in self, though. But that's
I do
interesting. You bring,
too. But I
yeah.
think that there's a line. Like I grew to a point in my business where I didn't have the time to go through those resources, but I'd not known anything different. And it
Oh,
felt like it would fix the problem, right? It was the next thing that I needed. When in reality, I needed a service professional to do that for me because I
oh
didn't
yeah.
have the time to go through that.
All right. So that's a really important point, which is harkening back to who, not how. Like there are times when, and this is not at all inconsistent. I don't think, at least you tell me if you're seeing it differently, not at all inconsistent with like the notion that like investing in yourself is like generally speaking the best investment you're ever going to. I mean, even Buffett is like, I mean, I know for me, I've had some courses that I paid a few $1,000s for that I've made multiples of that back from, right? But in this case where you start it's funny, my wife and I were having this, she was like, she invested in a course where she's going to
Mhm.
learn Facebook advertising. And I was like, I don't think that's your move. Not because like self improvement and investing, but like that's a who, not how. And I guess you're talking
Mhm.
about instances where people are buying all these courses on whatever. And it's like, no, just get somebody to do that so you can focus your time and get trained on something else that only you should be doing. Is
Yes,
that
and
kind of,
yeah, exactly. And I feel like it's can also reflect poorly. Like I know I've seen bad reviews sometimes for people that have bought a course and then not completed it. And it's no
yeah,
fault of the course provider. And I think there's that like self-reflection, right? And like I've done that before. To your point of you've made, thousands off of something that you've invested in, which I've done as well. I've also absolutely spent money and gotten hypothetically nothing monetarily out of it, but a
yeah,
really good learning lesson of this wasn't the time. Like it had nothing to do. The course, the program, etc., was
absolutely.
great. I
Yeah,
was not the right fit for it, which
yeah,
also goes to teach me in my business when and who I should be selling to, because I don't want to be selling a course to someone that isn't in a course place in their business.
right,
We need to be
right.
selling done for you and vice versa. And so like that has been invaluable as well to have the quote like failures. with course
Yeah.
investments.
Yeah. No, I love that, Kaitlyn. Well, I think that's I think that's a great place to leave it. I guess before I let you go, I mean, if people want to explore the idea of working with you, learn more about your services, or if they just want to connect for whatever reason, what is the best way for people to reach out to you?
I would say through our website, the freelancecfo.biz, B-I-Z, also on Instagram. We're on there all the time. We're millennials, so Instagram is the venue of choice at the freelance CFO.
Okay, Lynn, it's really been a treat chatting with you here. Thank you for sharing these pearls of wisdom, and thanks for doing what you do in our industry, helping creatives like run a tight, more stress-free financial ship. And really a pleasure having you on the show here today.
Thank you. It was really delightful.